So for the finale of ORKtober's community poll, we have the orc who crumped the rest. We are going through our tournament bracket as for who came out on top, giving a lore breakdown on these characters, why we independently chose them, to have fun, to get stuck in, to really know who it is to be an orc in our perspective. Also, we're also going to follow up with a origin kind of story of where we started, so you guys can get to know us more, similar to kind of like a podcast, our draft at this. So we're just going to overall just have a good time here, get stuck in. This is still live, so people can communicate back with us. But yeah, it's going to be a lore on the orcs, but also on WAAAGH Tactics, so you guys can actually know who I am. As most people are just kind of like, who the heck are these guys? And speaking of these guys, we have the boss himself, David. So David is co-founder of WAAAGH Tactics as well since the beginning, literally, as you'll find out in our lore story, origin story. So what's up, David?
Yeah, no, I'm excited to go over this orc lore and go over this tournament. It was pretty cool to see how many people participated and to see all these war boss characters crump each other in this tournament.
Yeah, it was really fun. I'm a big fan of orcs literally by their lore and their nature, as that really was the distinguishing factor on why I picked them as my faction. When I was sitting there in the store, if you guys just talking about ourselves already, I'm a veteran. David's a veteran. So, of course, like the stereotype, shout to Morty and Glory, veterans like to pick guardsmen or any kind of, very formal, generic kind of faction sometimes. So picking orc was really more about just how silly they are and their breakdown as a lore. So this is going to be a good time for us. And I know David himself started with Space Wolves, so he didn't know anything about a lot of these guys. So it was just funny when we would read stuff and he'd be like, what? Like, it's totally different than a Space Wolf lore, right?
Especially because Space Marines are so serious.
Serious.
Almost the opposite. So.
The orcs are unlike anybody else whenever you read the books and how silly they are, but they mean it at the same time. So let's right here, if you weren't paying attention or you're just a new get, so we have this ORKtober tournament bracket you can see in our posts. This was to look at, well, who does the orc community actually want to see come to real life on the tabletop with either a new updated model or a brand new model? So week by week through October, we were setting up votes. We got hundreds and hundreds of votes of people participating in this. So we started off with the brackets. So some of these guys were pretty hilarious, but we're going to talk about them, just briefly introduce people, then go through them getting eliminated, break them down further once they show they were eliminated, our opinions on why we think the community might have eliminated them. And then, of course, all the way until we get to the winner that we reveal at the end. So get stuck in with us, lads. Like you guys see, let us know what's going on, because I know we touched on some of this with Red Ones Go Faster. Shout out to that get in that episode. But we had a lot of traction. Orc community is really interactive with who they want. I think we're privileged, kind of like Ultramarines, right, where they get all the epic name characters. We don't get as many epic characters, I guess, in the game, but we have plenty of lore, plenty of history, stuff to draw back on and call back to, unlike the Leagues of Voltan. So that being said, let's start with the top to the bottom on our introductions here. We had Kaptain Badrukk, which is definitely one of the one of the oldest gifts we got around here. Recently lost in this edition.
Yes, just recently. He was still a thing in the Index.
In the Codex, he was he even had a place in the Codex with lore, which really just caught people off guard, right? That really was unfortunate. But he was up for the vote, so everybody knew who he was. Didn't need much to talk about. Then we had Gargaz Teefgrabba, right?
We got a little pushback on this
which was hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's just unfamiliar. For you guys that don't know, he's from the video game, the mobile video game. Was it Shoota's Teeth and Blood?
Yes.
So he's the main war boss protagonist in the video game.
Yeah, he is. And it's kind of like his point of view, and he's humorous because most of his motives was a hair's quig. Right. And then so it's not that it was his only motive. Of course, orcs are driven by their just general instinct to fight, to get stuck in and such like that. But I wanted to bring him up because, well, we'll get more into that once we talk about this get further. But he was someone that we got pushed back on because people weren't familiar. But I intentionally picked each of these guys for a reason, and it was for this episode. So as we continue, we have someone who I personally was very familiar with and in love with when I first started orcs was Tuska Daemon Killa, one of the most popular, if not the most popular, WAAAGH type character in all of 40K. Like everybody's at least somewhat familiar with this Psycho Git. Then we have, but if you're not, you're going to be today. Then we have Gut Black Heart.
All right, this is
David,
old school call out.
This was legendary for David. He was taken aback by this amazing. I'm just kidding. I'm being hyperbolic here. Yeah, he was kind of an unknown, right?
Yeah, so he was just an orc boy, right, from 4th edition.
Well, yeah, Well, he wasn't an orc boy necessarily, but yeah, he was a list of war boss, and he had orc boys with him, right? Gets Gruts, yeah.
Well, this
I jumped. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah. See, I'm messing up their names. Yeah, Gutrock. No, he was. Yeah, he was just a boy.
This was like just to throw a wrench in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, no, this guy has no chance. He's the dark horse.
But this was to give love to old Warhammer players, right?
Yeah.
That like sometimes people just forget about how it used to be for like the older fans, and how they just lost. How orcs kind of evolved through the editions.
Right.
And when you look at Gut Blackheart, you get that look of like, oh, orcs have changed quite drastically, though we still have the same kind of tenacity and ferocity we had. We did have a very comedic / kind of like structured silly theme even back then, which we're going to talk about when we look more at him, because I think the whole point of him was really just to take an old look back at old orc models. That's kind of what I was looking for him for.
A little shout out to the origin of orcs.
Yeah,
where they started
and how we've gotten way better. Like some factions, in my opinion, they didn't get better as they evolved with their lore and their development, their identity as a faction. I think orcs we have one of the best lore kind of positions, in my opinion. Honestly, like top 2 of all the protagonists, in my opinion. Maybe I'm biased, that's what I am. But it because of how we are as a faction and our identity, which we'll go to as we talk about Blackheart, and how we've evolved all the way to the next guy, Ufthak, which is on the opposite perspective, is completely new, right? Completely opposite spectrum of. He is the newest war boss introduced, completely being pushed by GW, has interactions with other named orc war boss characters, and the development between someone like that random Git to someone like Ufthak, who started off like someone like that random Git and then developed into a legend.
Yeah, it really shows the evolution of orc lore over the years, and I think, speaking as a Space Wolf player, that orcs have the most. GW's done a really good job evolving the orc lore and expanding it.
Yeah, and it'll be fun as we keep talking about this, because it made me like orcs more the more I got into that, right? Then we have and people were saying, is that a mobile? No, it was on Steam. It's on a console. It wasn't on mobile though. It was on Steam and console and stuff like that. So if you guys want to play, let me know. I'll play. All right, so that's a different conversation. Then we have but shout out to live chat that's out here. What's up, Jay Hugh? Oh. Then we have we did Ufthak. Ufthak's awesome, right? We'll get to him. Then we have Grits Guts, which is the person I wanted to talk about already. Another very notorious person in the old 40K lexicon or WAAAGHpedia, right, David?
Yeah, he's got a really funny story.
What was the type of story that he has that you mentioned? What the stereotype is called? Where it's kind of like self-circling, but he has a great story in his warp travels, we'll say. Then we have Boss Zagstruk, which personally, I love this Git. Love the model. One of the first ones I had. I thought he was one of the best looking models there was. Whenever that happens to you as a person, you automatically become more of a fan of them, right? Like your guy, I feel like Arjak Rockfist was one of yours.
Yeah.
Like he's not like the most familiar Space Wolf character, but you like him because you had the model, the real official model, and you like just beating people up with him.
Yeah, and the Boss Zagstruk has a real good model. Like I just like the aesthetics on him. He's a lot of personality in that model. Even
to this day, like when everybody was evolving and getting better models, the old Boss Zagstruk stood out. It was still hanging with the best of Gits, still was a proper size, and he was a really fun epic to have. So I know he's popular in our community. Then we go with last but certainly not least, the Mad Dok Grotsnik himself, the Mad Dok for the Grand Prophet of the WAAAGH. Honestly, one of the most popular orc characters right now, but the most familiar with all of us because he has a recent book that just came out, special edition book. It was the Mad Doc's personal book about him and his own story. The best way to put it is it was more of a horror story than any of us expected. It's kind of the one thing I seen when I asked my community and just talked to people as a whole who had kind of been familiar with the book. They're like, yeah, orc book, decent book. Definitely more of a horror story than we expected out here. And that was a good way to put it as we get into this. So as we have these characters, they'll have their place. Some was just so that we can talk about it and pontificate on random topics and kind of branch out into tangents, right? But that's why we did this, for the fun of it, and to also talk about all these gets in a lore informative manner for anybody who's not familiar. A lot of new people to the horror community, a lot of stuff that they've heard that are funny stereotypes and have some truth to them. So we're going to just work all that out today. But as we move on to the first matchups, we had the eliminations.
Yeah,
so
this one was not close, as
Yeah,
you guys can predict.
So we're going to start from the top if you're looking on screen. As for the first matchup, we'll discuss the person who was eliminated as we go through each one of these matchups, and then we'll move on to the following matchup of the winners, right? So to start it off, we had Kaptain Badrukk was the very first competition we had. Kaptain Badrukk versus Gargaz Teefgrabba, which was hilarious because this is absolutely when everybody kind of clapped back to us and was like, who is that guy? They're like, what are you doing? What they were like, what are you doing? WAAAGH Taktiks putting Kaptain Badrukk himself against some random dude that nobody knew the name of.
They were probably wondering, is this one of your narrative campaign orcs, personal models?
Yeah, they thought you guys thought I made him up, right? I loved it. So let me anyways, I think I wanted to show a picture of this kid anyways. I think I have one still right here. But that being said, I like him because one, he's introduced from the game, and with orcs being the next big bad of the next edition, right? And we look at the new Space Marine game. We look at GW now interacting with Amazon and developing shows. Who's to say that orcs wouldn't become interesting for Amazon and GW to kind of elaborate on and make into a rival or an epic character that's going to be in their own show or part of a video game or an expansion in a DLC for etc. So honestly, me going to someone like Gargaz Teefgrabba, arguably I could have picked someone like Warboss Grimskull, arguably, just because he's already in a Space Marine game. But I think someone new is what is more likely for Amazon to use. And GW wouldn't necessarily have to come with 100% new. They can just pull from Gargaz as someone who they already had. David, how'd you feel about Gargaz and like his place in this?
Well, he's got a good blend of that humor when talking about his main motivation for going on his whole journey. Because going after the hair squig.
Yes.
And then along that way, he's got a lot of feats, actually.
Yeah, he does.
He took down, I think, a knight. I think he took down a knight by himself.
He helped. Yeah, but yeah, he did. He had dudes with him when he was doing stuff, of course, like any orc. But if you're the main one, then you get most of the credit for it, right? You're the biggest get. He in the game, he was also overfought other knobs. Eventually, he went back to the war boss who stole his hair squig, killed him, took over the WAAAGH, and then popped the hair squig on his head. And he was like, yeah, I'm good now. This is all I needed. And ultimately, it just all started because when he first was a smaller boy and was into a fight, he was going to be executed by a commissar. And then the squig from his rival, the hair squig, jumped off the corpse of that guy, attacked the commissar, killed the commissar. When the war boss walked up to him, he took credit for killing the commissar. So he's like, yeah, I'm pretty dope. Right? Just showing off that he's a big orc. And then the war boss was like, hey, I actually like that squig you got there, that hair squig, because having hair is kind of like having a trophy. And, the squig is kind of seen as a parasite, actually. So then he took the hair squig, and from that point on, our boy Gargaz Teefgrabba actually had beef, right? He had a rivalry with his war boss and took it all the way to the end, enough to overthrow him and take over his WAAAGH. But no one knew that, no one cared. Yet I just thought in general, GW might actually re-bring this guy back up because I'm very interested in how orcs can become viewed and looked at or elaborated on with this new Amazon deal. A lot of people are overlooking orcs and they're saying, well, what about Eisenhorn, which is a great story, right, David? You're a fan of Eisenhorn, the books. I haven't got into it. David has. But I think if you really look at what GW does, they feel really comfortable putting orcs forward as an enemy. And it's something that the general public is familiar with, right? We got Lord of the Rings, we have orcs. We have some kind of fantasy games like World of Warcraft, for example. Orcs. There's like orcs are just a popular antagonist that you could be familiar with and not really have to elaborate too much on. Right. Yeah. So yeah, people are like, they'll do chaos for the show, but who's to say they're to do one? We're just speaking of one limited show. I'm not saying it has to be with Henry Cavill, right? Just for like you were bringing up with the other Space Marine content from the Amazon show.
Yeah, so one of the rumors is he wants to tackle the Horus Heresy, and during that time, there's that big battle in Armageddon.
Yeah,
with one of the great where they take down one of the Great Walls. That's
yeah, they have the War of the Beasts that were around in the similar time right before everything really popped off. Anyways, that you could go even further on if he's trying to go that late. But GW has shown to have those, not GW, sorry, Amazon, and what's popular right now in media are those short stories.
The anthology series.
Yeah, any of these anthology series. And I personally think with a lot of these characters, you can, and when I speak of that, it's kind of like you've seen in Love, Death, Robots, or that new show that, what's it called? I'm having a brain fart on Amazon, the series.
Oh, the Secret Level?
The Secret Level episodes. Those are all just self-contained short stories. So even though I do agree, and I understand Henry Cavill wants to hit chaos, who's to say orcs wouldn't be a great short story that I don't have to explain the enemy? You just show some orcs, right? And so as you go through this is also why I brought up some of these characters. So anyways, Gargaz Teefgrabba got taken out. And you never know, so you'll see him again in his own minor episode of somewhere along the way. But easily, Kaptain Badrukk threw that guy for a spin, like a 98% win. Then we go to Tuska Daemon Killa versus Dok Grotsnik, David's favorite guy. Right, David?
Yeah, there's. I love his lore. It's very deep.
It's very, very deep.
Yeah, he wields a bolt gun. That's
what?
all we put it.
So it was funny because the people who knew who he was were actually kind of upset. Like when they were like, "What is this WAAAGH Tactics?" Here you go. Look on the screen, guys. There he is. He wasn't made up. Dok Grotsnik, Blackheart is an old character from like fourth edition.
Yeah.
Fourth edition. Now, when you look at these guys, the first initial concept for what GW wanted orcs to be were pirates. We're like space pirates, space rogues. A lot of the time you can see them being drawn in this way, shown off in this way. So GW had this initial concept of orcs are like space pirates. Yeah. And so if you look at where we've evolved now to this day, you can compare him to someone like, you can compare your modern orc or your modern lore to someone like this little space pirate with the black troop. So I really just picked him to show the simplicity behind orcs used to look. The pointy ears, the smaller hunchback. It's a mixture of what we would consider an orc nowadays and a goblin.
Yeah,
is what orcs really used to look like. So this was actually just more to give reference and to give people kind of some perspective as we go forward and looking at the newer orcs, the newer models, the newer things that have come out. So of course we didn't take him serious as a candidate for this competition. So he was blown out of the water by Tuska Demon Slayer. We knew going into this branch of the bracket that it was going to be Kaptain Badrukk versus Tuska Demon Slayer. I wanted to see that. Two of the first characters I ever knew about in 40K. So we'll look at the results after this. But as we moved on, then we moved to the second branch of the bracket.
All right, yeah, and this is where we got Ufthak Blackhawk, another favorite.
Ufthak. Yeah.
A lot of people are rooting for this guy to win.
I personally kind of like, because we all put our, bets in who we thought would come out on top. And I felt like the orc community is very, very familiar and very into Ufthak. Right. So he was kind of already seen as one of the favorites, but he obviously annihilated Grit's Guts, which was David's favorite guy.
Yeah, I just thought it was unique that he warp travels. And his story, like I was mentioning earlier, that he killed his earlier self just so he could have his favorite gun as a spare.
Yeah. So if people aren't familiar with orcs, this is also why I think it would be good as a secret level story or one of those short self-contained stories that doesn't need necessarily much explanation but can show the rest of the 40k universe. Is if you take something like a Grits Gut story, put it into its all tiny short for 15-minute episode where an orc travels back in time through the warp, see the things in the warp, intentionally fights them, comes out on the other side, kills that guy, takes his gear. The crowd would be like, wait, that's him. How do you get back there? A lot of the most popular episodes that are either in stuff like Love, Death, Robots or in any kind of social media right now are things that are short, intense, and kind of like referring, because then you kind of get stuck in a loop of, well, which part of the story connects to earlier parts in the story? How does this all go together? And what's the whole greater universe implications of this short story? And I felt like Grits Guts was the perfect example of that, right?
Right.
So
it also make for like a good testing ground to kind of gauge with the community what they're interested in. Did they like the story? Do they want to see more of any particular character?
Yeah, and this could even be like, obviously given from the point of view of a human. Doesn't have to be necessarily just Grits Guts as the main character or anything like that. But this sort of story, I thought he would be a great kind of introduction in there as well. So him he was my favorite version of that, because very easy to see this in your own head, even read as a fan story of showing off some orcs. He has two shooters, or he has a shooter, and he likes it. Everybody loves it. He goes into the warp to fight some warp entities, pops out, sees himself, takes his other gun, has two, and then he gets it back into the cycle. If he has this gun, he has his favorite gun. Maybe if it's, I can already envision it, right? And just one of those Love, Death, Robot type episodes.
Well, like at the end, they unveil that it's just a spare. There he already has.
Yeah. And then he just
all that
opens his coat and he has several of them. He already had a spare, right? Like, he just continuously collects his own. He becomes the one, like the old Jet Li movie. So Grits Guts the one. So
and then he does it again.
He does it again. Yeah, and he keeps going until one kills him, and then takes his coat and does it all over. So I thought that was hilarious in my head. I've had too much. Obviously, me and David had too much fun with this. I don't know. We're just. But anyways, he's 4th edition. Got eliminated. Nobody liked him enough. But we expected that. What I really wasn't sure was the following one.
Right. Matchup. So we have here a recent model as well, and Boss Zagstruk versus everyone's favorite Mad Dok.
Yeah.
Mad Dok Grotsnik.
Yeah. And 2 OG kind of type of models, both eliminated from the orcs, character codex archive in that sense. They exist, like they were showed in like a name and such, but I'm saying they're not chose to be having models and be played in the game anymore. So I was wondering, who would people pick? Was this one close in the votes? I don't remember. Yeah. I think you were saying this one was actually close in the votes, which was fun to see. I was happy to see that they were close in the votes. I personally, Zagstruk, one of my first models. If you didn't know about Zagstruk, just to explain it, no, he is not a war boss. So speaking of lore, if you ever see boss, right, a boss is better, bigger, and more impressive than a knob. Typically next in line or developing in line to challenge the war boss. So to everyone else, he'll be their boss because he's typically second biggest, in contention to be a war boss, but not necessarily there yet. So everyone else would refer to him as a boss because he's bigger and greater than them. But he's not in charge of the whole war, so he's not the war boss. So Zagstruk was very big and impressive, right? He has like minor kind of feats of he would scare kind of squig-offs from charging. Obviously, that could be an embellished story. But what he's known for is the reason he has the cybernetic legs is because he fought Dreadnought, right? Because he's an orc, of course. So he went into a fight to fight a Dreadnought as a Storm Boy, because that's essentially what he is. A lot of fast orcs start off as Storm Boys, if they're in a cult of speed, for example, and such. But he charges into the Dreadnought, thinking he's big and bad. Dreadnought rips him in half. All right, Dreadnought rips him in half, and then when he's ripped in half, he still finds a way to climb his way onto the cockpit of the Dreadnought, and then use his teeth and hands to rip apart the cockpit and still overcome the Dreadnought, and then use bits of it to make his body. which David found was pretty hilarious and one of his favorite parts.
Yeah, and that's just really cool that his legs are a memento of that battle.
Yeah, that's a good way to
That's
put
what
it.
makes his model like so cool, because it's telling a story.
Yes,
You just have to like do a little bit of work to find out what it means.
True. He actually is has a story to exactly how he looks, which is what you want in your epic characters. Not just that they look cool, but like we've seen in Ufthak, which is one of the only characters that a lot of orc people would be familiar with. All these characters, when you look at them, the more, as you'll see today that we look at them, the more that you're able to be like, oh, I get what they were doing, why he looks like that, which is the best part of 40K to me. The characters that can kind of tell a story when you look at them.
Yeah, and Mad Dok Grotsnik barely squeaked this one out at 58% versus 42 for boss. So that's a sway of like less than 10% of the votes. So
wow,
20 more votes for boss, and he could have won.
Dang. See, you guys, where were you at? And here's Boss Zagstruk, if you hadn't seen him before, and his claw-like type bodies and legs and such. So that was our get. I love him. I still have the model. I think he's proper size. Is the big number one thing I want to say as a model. Very broad-shouldered, very large, easy to distinguish amongst other models, which is something that wasn't common for his resin counterparts. So the community liked him a lot. As for where he's at in lore, why he can be brought back is he was fighting some Eldar. The Eldar were outmaneuvering him. He jumped into the warp to follow them. No one's seen him for like 10 months, or whatever. And then he appeared, killed some Ludas, and then he jacked a plane and then just flew away, essentially, right? He took a fight Obama, and then he just left, and no one knows where he's at, but he had a bunch of Eldar skulls on his way out, which is what we like to see. Yeah,
I can see him being introduced like as a third party in a storyline, like we mentioned Eisenhorn, and he does fight a lot of the chaos and Eldar, and it could be where he encounters Eldar, and all of a sudden Boss Zagstruk's already there doing something, and he's only there for a moment, but it's an opportunity to introduce orcs to the lore and to the series.
Yeah, and what's people aren't familiar with, if you haven't read the books, right, is it's never just one faction. No, I shouldn't say never, because maybe there's a book somewhere out there. Just hardly ever one faction only fighting one faction only. There's always a third kind of party that slips in there and starts making it kind of a three-way festival, even if it's only a specific squad or a small subgroup or a big boss monster at the end. It doesn't matter. So it's very common that if they're going to introduce humans in chaos, just like we've seen in other books or lore that you've come across, who's to say the humans weren't fighting orcs first, and then chaos was also there, or then was brought there, or became more empowered, etc., etc. So that's what David was kind of implying there, and that's what I think I'm feeling the most, because guys, they're coming with the next edition with orcs at the same time that we're getting Amazon connections. Why would they not try to push their starter sale box, their starter faction box, at least a bit with this momentum, if it lines up well, which Gork and Mork willing it will. But then we move to Mad Dok Grotsnik coming out on top here, barely sneaking it out, which he can be talked about a lot himself because of his book. But that was the winners of those competitions. The only thing that was really contentious there was Boss Zagstruk versus Mad Dok Grotsnik. Boom. And then we move on. So the final for the next bracket, the semifinal bracket, we have Kaptain Badrukk versus Tuska Daemon Killa, Ufthak Blackhawk versus Mad Dok Grotsnik. All right, so if you didn't vote, you can look right now and guess who you think's gonna win. But we move on to the whole thing, I guess. Yeah, might as well. So then we move on to the winners between Tuska and Kaptain Badrukk to start off.
Yeah, so this one wasn't as close as I was anticipating.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, the Kaptain Badrukk being a real model and being closer to what we were trying to present as which character would you like to see in 11th edition come back or get a model. So I guess the recency bias might have won it for Kaptain Badrukk. It lore's deeper.
I think it was a mixture. I think it was a mixture of what people felt was realistic. Right. They wanted to vote for something that they think could win. Even though I definitely seen people in the comments and such that were like, "Yeah, I want Tuska Daemon Killa to win." Though I'm a big fan of Kaptain Badrukk, I must say, as I said with my last other video with Red Ones, I would absolutely love to have a super killy war boss epic character that was just really killy, even outside of the wall, could get stuff done. I think we missed that in our codex. We don't have something like that. Maybe like an aura where he acts even more like a demon prince lone up, where he's just a big killy dude because he's been fighting in the warp for so long, but he's a psycho, so he can't lead orcs. He just kind of gives them a passive buff being around them. It would be sick. I that's why, but I think it had to do more with, one, people were familiar with Badrukk and he had a real character. 2, they wanted to vote for something that was realistic. 3, I just like Tuska, the concept of Tuska a lot, right? But if you want to talk about Tuska then, because in his elimination, we should kind of explain him a little, or I could do it if you want.
Yeah, if you want to start it off.
Well, Tuska just started off as just a basic, warlord, a war boss that had a ship. And what happened is, so it's funny if you're not familiar, in short, when anybody travels through the warp, they happen to have a Geller field. It protects them from things in the warp fighting them, except for orcs, where they don't have Geller fields. They just move through the warp and then depending on how many weird boys and such they have, the demons or of the warp, the enemies of the warp kind of just find their way to the orcs and start fighting them on their ship. So in this case, as he was moving through the warp and his weird boys, because not every WAAAGH has the same amount of weird boys or pain boys, or right, every WAAAGH is better at something and has more depending on what energies Gork and Mork give them. So it was implied that Tuska's WAAAGH had a lot of weird boys already, and so because of that, a lot of enemies showed up, and a big kind of monstrous dude showed up into his ship. He fought him, took his horns, wore them, and was like, I kind of like this. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, I kind of like this loot. He started looking at it like, this is dope. This is fun. They got big horns. They're spiky. I can use it as a weapon. I can use it as a trophy, whatever. So he then instructed his weird boys to guide him into the Eye of Terror, where he was like, oh, why are we being around the bush? Let's just go right where they're all at. When he found out that, because the orcs call that the grin of Mork's grin or Gork's grin. I guess you could say whichever you want, but they see a Gork's grin as like a big thing that they're happy about, because the chaos and all the fighting that happened because of it. So he just dove right in. So I was into that. Dove right in there. I know you want to pick up from here, or you want me to?
I was just gonna mention how I think it's cool that he specifically fights corn demons versus the other ones.
True.
Corn got that persona of being more aggressive and fighting, where the other ones are more tricksy
and that goes to how that happened to be, is because as Tuska went into the warp, if you're not familiar, say you're a newer person in 40K, which semi-explain it to you, the warp isn't necessarily like a spirit realm where everybody turns into a ghost or something. It's more like the warp energy manipulate the actual tangible physical planets themselves and space itself. So as the orcs are flying through it, the planets are being adjusted, the inhabitants are being adjusted and changed into these warp demonic type things. So the orcs are just demolishing entire planets, right? It's not that they just jumped into this and then it was like, trapped into Gork's Grin. No. Tuska's WAAAGH was going through the Eye of Terror, destroying demon planets, demon-infested planets themselves, just killing everybody. They were like, whatever. And they just kept growing bigger. To them, it was no different than just showing it up to a different part of the Imperium and crumping on them. But he showed up into the Eye of Terror like, yeah, no different. Just take all the stuff I want, loot these. This planet's kind of stinky. That's weird, but I'm still gonna crump them. It was like that, that was made it appealing. So like David said, then he got to a planet that was a living organism itself, essentially. And all his boys were standing on top of it. They realized it was living itself. They started stabbing the planet itself, and it came to life, and a bunch of corn demons came out of it. Right, and that's what they was bringing up. David's a fan of corn. That's one of his other.
Yeah, I own corn as well.
So then he kept it, but he wanted to fight corn demons, and what David's bringing up is because he wants the horns. He wants the spiky bits. He wants the teeth. He wants that. He finds that the most appealing ones to fight. So he found the corn planet, got into fight with the demon prince, was kind of getting beat up. his weird boys got a little, because you can't really defeat Khorne with your, with warp energy, but you can distract them and do stuff to them. So his weird boys intervened a little bit. So then Tuska made sure that he snapped up them balls real quick, cut off his butts, and the demon prince, and then he got Krumped after that. But ultimately, he was in the citadel, the brass citadel, with the elite bloodletter generals, and Khorne decided to just bring back his WAAAGH continuously. And like I said, because the warp warp affected realm is still tangible, physical, it's not like it becomes a ghost planet. The spores that were released from his WAAAGH just go all over the planet and then get regrown and come back to life, and then just come into an endless cycle of fighting. So
it was like mutually beneficial to both sides.
Yes,
Khorne got blood for the blood god. Demon Tuska Killa got his teeth.
Yeah, so Demon Tuska's underlying horde on a daily basis goes in a cycle where they release a bunch of fungal clouds from all the greenskins dying. Then there's a bunch of bloodstained foothills that helps it grow faster. They're born, mature quickly, and then start fighting again. And that suits Demon Killa just fine, and that suits the Khorne himself, because ultimately that's all Khorne wants. So this is almost like a symbiotic relationship of Khorne and Gork and Mork, because if you don't know about Gork and Mork, how they work is from the orcs fighting in WAAAGH and kind of referencing their gods and giving praise to their gods and using the power of their gods to commit more acts in battle, that empowers their gods to be more powerful. So really it's Khorne and them both fighting. It's almost like two static developing a charge together. So that's why I'm a fan of Tuska, just because how ridiculous he is. But his appearance was in 4th edition, and then he also appeared in the Chaos Demons book in 6th edition, which I thought was pretty awesome. That even Chaos itself had to reference him. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Tuska, but I think people just, if they didn't know, that's where he's at. Then we move to Ufthak Blackhawk versus Mad Dok Grotsnik.
Oh, and we got a super chat from Flynn. And he kind of messed it up a little bit, but he clarifies what he meant. Says, do yourself a favor, open an orc book and use as a PDF and use text to speech. Program saying orc words is hilarious.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I want to do that now. Look, you
could do that for a stream or something.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Just react to it.
just put a bunch of different reference words up for orcs, and just as soon as someone says one or writes it in the chat, I just have it read it. No, that would be great. I didn't even think of doing that. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat. We do it for the love here, the love of the WAAAGH. Whoa! So thank you very much, Flynn. Nice to see you here. You've been here since we started. Thank you, buddy, for all the love. And he says, oh, they messed up the super chat. You didn't mess it up. You did it just right, because orcs should never beaten. Shout out to the rest of the chats here with all the other gets around here. And they said, he said he did it with the Ufthak short story. So silly. Speaking of Ufthak, so he's like, I did it with the Ufthak short story. Ufthak versus Mad Dok Grotsnik, which was interesting.
Yeah, I was pulling for Mad Dok in this one. I thought he could pull it off.
Because to me, it was the two most recent books.
Right.
The two most recent characters that you were kind of pitting against in the orc community. Was this poll close?
Yeah, it was another like 52 to 48.
47. No, that close?
It was the closest one.
Yeah. Dang. Man, Ufthak went through a bunch of challenges just to get here hard votes. He was taking down all the other epic characters, while Kaptain Badrukk was taking down like the fandom characters, right?
He's the number 1 seed, dude. You got the easiest path to.
Sometimes, right? That's great. It's true. He is the number 1 seed. That's true. So yeah, then we had Mad Dok Grotsnik. So I recently did the book or read the book. I could. Should I do a review someday? Or I don't know what. But I thought about doing
something we're thinking of doing.
So if you guys want, let me know. I thought about doing a review of the book, because most of y'all aren't going to read it, can't get a hold of it, and wouldn't take the time to read it. So I kind of want to do a review of it for my own sake and fun, and kind of take the points of view from it, because I liked it a lot. But I liked it a lot in its unique way, even though it was very different than any other Orky book, in my opinion. So personally, but this was very much against the old and the new, once again being pitted off against each other, with Mad Dok being very old, old referent kind of character, old model, right? He's the mad git that saved Gaz and rebuilt him twice, He's been introduced in 2nd edition, so the only other Git as old as him is Kaptain Badrukk, which makes sense though if you have Gaz, right?
When you were recapping the book to me, you were mentioning how it was kind of a lot of people got the like horror vibe to it. When you're telling me, it kind of gave me like the it's like a serial killer vibe.
Yeah,
especially with the model, and we were looking at the model and realizing, this model is also telling a story with his skin.
Yeah, no, I guess it is kind of a good way to look at him. They're called mad docs because orcs are very literal with their words. If they think something is mad or insane, they're just simply going to call it that. And so they really do think mad doc is an insane from the orc theological, ethical, because orcs do have ethics, and like they do things they have care about and that they hold standards to. And Mad Dok Grotsnik goes beyond all those to the point that he makes other orcs very uncomfortable. It's not that they're necessarily always scared of him, because some guys are just too big to be scared of him, but he does make them uncomfortable. They do feel like he's unfamiliar, to the point that he almost self-identifies as being superior to all other orcs, including Gaz. Which, like I said, I'm not going to completely break down the whole book, but most people would just think, well, he's the pain boy. He helps out Gaz and heals him like a good apothecary, right? Yeah. Happy Doc making the biggest and baddest boss, that he's having just pure pleasure in that. There is pleasure in Mad Dok assisting Gaz and making him bigger, but it's not that simple. He's dual multi-personality. There is a dark side to him that also hates Gaz and also doesn't want what's best for him and sees Gaz as, deficient in his own way. And most people would never understand that or even consider that. I know that I never even took that into consideration when I first started dealing with orcs. When I just heard who Mad Dok Grotsnik was, I was like, he's the dude who just heals Gaz. I'm sure they're best friends, right? Like, I know that I used to literally try to put like a Gaz next to like a Doc, like a pain boy, like, look, he's next to him, he's gonna heal him, be friends. Unstoppable. That's not how that goes. That's not how that goes as an orc, which I can break down in the book review for more than that. But to end it all off on that with Mad Dok, just to show his old model, right? The book explains more about why he looks like this. But he is very Frankenstein-esque, very insane, very unique, and crosses boundaries with orcs all the time, to the point that Gaz himself has to kind of check him and be like, hey, you're going out of bounds with what we're okay with as orcs. So the stitches on his body are because, it's we all know that a pain boy will take a head and put it on another orc body, and that's humorous. But to think that an orc just continuously reconstructs himself with countless other orc body parts does actually have mental implications on orcs as well as the physical ones. And that's what you end up finding out from Mad Dok Grotsnik, which I thought was sick, because like I said, this is what makes orcs so much different than every other faction.
Right.
You can have a silly, dumb character. You can have a literal, insane, homicidal character that's predatory to other orcs, right? The way his name is a play on words, that he's Mad Dok, that he snicks or he nicks, right? To nick something in the orc vocab is to crump it, to kill it, right? So his word play on word is he nicks grots continuously. He's always stealing people's grots and killing them. But later he explains what his true point of view is on what he defines as a grot. And it just really makes you go, okay, this dude's totally out of bounds. And that's just not exactly how orcs go. So I really like that. He's a unique character on that. And each one of these epic characters helps also you define how orcs are so different, and why I'm very hopeful and very positive. Honestly, I'm short this, clip this, show it to Valrack or whoever you want. Trust me, orcs are going to get something from this Amazon deal if it doesn't completely collapse right away. And they're going to get it way more, way sooner and more common than in most of the other factions. The only other one I can see is maybe like a Necron, just because they already have some animations for it or whatever.
Right. But earlier when we were mentioning, someone mentioned they'll probably introduce chaos first, or instead. I think the big difference, there is similarities between orcs and chaos demons and other antagonists. But those other antagonists tend to be singular focused, where orcs are more layered,
malleable. And they're more malleable into what their intent, like their motives are.
Yeah, that and they offer that comedic relief. And what's a story without some comedic relief? No other faction really offers that.
I mean, what's popular in modern society also is if you have some humor behind your dark, story and your dark theme, and that your character, the bad guys are humorous. That way, you cheer for them without feeling like you have to morally agree with them. And the orcs are perfect for that. They're morally ambiguous and neutral because in reality, they're just enjoying the universe itself. And every story in 40K, like I said, for the most part, goes that there's other factions fighting each other and some but third parties. And orcs are great as a third party, as in they're the one who's getting beat up and isn't the main focus, or they're the ones that just get reintroduced late into the fight. They work both ways. They can be the punching bag, they can be the sandbag, they can be so many things that other factions can't be. You can't introduce Necrons and they be the weakest faction in the three-way if you're going by the lore standards. Right. There's no weak version of a Necron Tomb World being released, but there are versions of orcs that don't have technology yet that you can fight. You can't fight weak Tyranids without implying that the entire High Fleet's going to show up and destroy that planet now. So orcs are, you could take them to absolute catastrophe or take them to absolute skirmish level.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm telling you guys. We're talking about all these characters because GW, all of this is going to be impactful. Speaking of impactful, we got Wicked Joe War for the 20 WAAAGH Taktiks memberships. We got that after action report coming out. Warhorde versus World Eaters. And so make sure we're going to see that come out, and then we're going to show that off. So if you got one of these, thank Joe for his huge support as always since the very beginning. And be sure to look out for that. Let us know what you think. He says, sorry I joined late. You gets, I was topside. Whoa. So yeah, that's what's up. So yeah, I like that. So we got Mad Dok Grotsnik losing it there, but he's actually way deeper character than I thought. I thought he was just Gaz's like little homie, like little nurse. It's definitely not the case. Definitely not the case. So then we go to the final, final matchup.
Yep. I think everyone kind of anticipated this one, looking at the brackets.
How did you? Yeah, right. These were the two favored that right away I was like, I think it's going to end up with Ufthak and Blackhawk. Ufthak, I said Bluehawk and Afthak. I think it's going to end up Ufthak versus Kaptain Badrukk. I was wondering with Mad Dok, and when I casted my vote, I might have voted for Mad Dok Grotsnik. I might have been listening to the book when I casted the vote. Yeah, so I wasn't sure what was going to happen, right? And yeah, so I a little bit of me was like, wow, this is the ultimate old versus the new at its finale, because Kaptain Badrukk was the first character introduced, eliminating Captain, introduced, and Ufthak is the most recent character introduced. So this is very much the oldest versus the newest.
And their lores cross paths.
Exactly. Cool. When Kaptain Badruck's already at his essentially peak, or one of his peaks with momentum, Ufthak meets him when Ufthak is essentially a knob level individual in the original book. So it was interesting to see them face off here, and just like in the book, technically Kaptain Badruck's a bigger and better right now, at least in the state of the current things. So Ufthak Blackhawk recent came in with two different books. First book versus Admech, where he was fighting Admech, released the demon engine. He was interacting with Kaptain Badrukk in that book, where they both were fighting the same Forge World planet, decided to coincide and operate together, which is another thing we see with orcs, which makes them different. If two Tyranid hive tendrils meet each other, they just eat each other. They don't just talk it out, and orcs were able to talk it out. Fight there. Ufthak takes down a knight. We move into the second book, where he's now more known. He has moved on to like a big boss status. He's still with the same mech lord. He gets into all types of situations there. I don't know how much of the book should I introduce. What do you feel like? I don't want to say every single thing about him, but
yeah, I don't know. Is that maybe another video you guys would be interested in? Is breaking down any
the
of the
books?
other
Those are
books?
actual books. Yeah, I'm down and break down the books. I've listened or have them, all of them. But what I liked about this one is that when they introduced, they gave a kind of a loophole for Ufthak to get tremendously larger, which is when he gets injected with the Drukhari stuff and the Mad Dok's juice at the same time, kind of counteracting each other. So while he's dying, he's getting bigger, which is like kind of like a cheat code for orcs, right? Like if you played Pokemon back in the day, you have the wild berries, or Zenkai boost, if you're familiar with anime or whatever you want to call it, where as he's taking damage, typically if he comes near death and he overcomes it, Ork gets bigger. So as he's slowly getting destroyed by the Eldar's poisons and toxins, he's getting revived by the Mad Dok as well. So then it's kind of like a cheat code for him to wake up extremely large, right? So and then ultimately when he ascends to his final state as a war boss, you know, he's essentially the same size as a Big Mech in Mega Armor. So he turns into Mega Armored sized, which is proper for a war boss. But I mean, that means he's freaking huge, right? Because we all know Meganod would be huge. Ufthak is huge in himself. So I look forward to seeing more stuff about him. He has the fact that he has his characteristics, so you can kind of follow him and be like, oh, I like this guy, I can root for him. But he has the Snaz hammer. He carries a shock rifle that he took off of Dragsta. That was also, he has a squig that everybody knows that orcs have a pet squig. The traditional war boss model has a squig, but he has a pet squig. And that's from the books as well. Princess, shout out to Princess. So like David was saying earlier, with all the orc models and characters having the bodies that, tell a story about who they are, which is common for all of 40K, but really fun when you are actually familiar with why a character looks like they look. In my opinion, makes you resonate with them more, relate to them more, have more encouragement to paint them, and all that kind of good stuff there. So I'm a fan of Ufthak, a lot to look forward to, but there's just too much with Kaptain Badrukk, and he just overcame him to end up as the biggest and the best. So just a little direct breakdown on Kaptain Badrukk, the things that we just kind of wanted to talk about if people didn't know, because this is what the orc community wants. But how was this vote at the end? Kaptain Badrukk versus Ufthak.
Yeah, this one was close.
How was it? Pretty close too?
Yeah, it was like probably like a 70, high 38.
Okay, so not as close as Mad Dok and such, but so people were really convinced that they wanted Kaptain Badrukk from what we remembered. So yeah, where he came out, second edition debut, he was right there in the beginning. And as I mentioned earlier, when GW first envisioned orcs and what we would be, we were space pirates. So Kaptain Badrukk, being the first character released, looks like a space pirate. But him becoming a certain clan and running a specific style more evolved as time passed. So we'll talk more about that, what that actually means for him, and why so many people are close to this Git, as in lore-wise and uniqueness with how he would play on the tabletop and his war gear, which is the fun part of him, right? So I don't know if you want to take it from there, David.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that he started out as a Bad Moons, and what was more interesting is the reason why he got kicked out.
Yeah.
He had too many teeth for his own good.
He had too much money,
Yeah, those other orcs didn't like it. They got jealous.
Yeah, I think when they say, because David was like, what does that mean for their own good, right? Not or familiar with orcs necessarily, fully like all of us. If you didn't know, orcs' teeth are their form of currency, which he was familiar with. Why would that be a bad thing? Well, it just means that everyone is constantly trying to crump him and take his teeth as well, which could be problematic if there's constant infighting to that degree. So it could be that him, and because if you didn't know, what a flash kid is another orc that also has too many teeth. It's a genetic trait like a lot of the other orc mutations and such. So if anything, all these guys have too much teeth. They become too wealthy within the community. They have too much influence within the community. It's like someone just natively being born and pooping gold, right? And so it could be a problem if we could just have a clan of people that poop gold and could just really mess up the economy, right? And that's the thing with orc currency, their teeth are known to deteriorate and just vanish. So they're supposed to be short-term currency. But if you constantly just always have teeth, that's a problem to everything around you. You're buying all the best stuff, the biggest stuff. Everybody hates you for it. You get kicked out, which is how you become a freebooter, right? So that's what David's saying. So you start as a bad moon genetically, because freebooters isn't an orc clan by genetics necessarily. Freebooters are unlike all the other orc clans. So bad moons are a genetic trait where they're more likely to shoe, and then Death Dreads more likely to have mechs, Goths more likely to have Meganobs and big orcs. Speed Freaks more likely to have the buggies and speedsters and such like that, right? So each clan typically identifies with the genetic trait or preference and traits and powers. Freebooters aren't like that. Freebooters are literally just everything else. which is what makes Kaptain Badrukk so unique. But why GW has freebooters is because their initial intentions for orcs were simply what freebooters are, which are pirate orcs that are rogues.
Right. That kind of shows the evolution of the lore, like we were
Exactly.
describing earlier, that
Mhm.
as they defined more roles and more detachment traits and genetics, they still wanted to keep their original idea and just kind of pushed it off to
freebooters are the original idea of what orcs were intended to be at the start, very, very start. Right before the assault on Black Reach, which is one of the most familiar orc points, references of orc lore in all of 40K when they fight the Black Templars. In that book, they're very much seen as like a force of nature, very easy to identify with the Goths as like just brutish beasts. But even before that, that's usually the most familiar reference point for all of orcs. If you go even before that, orcs were freebooters, orcs were pirates, orcs were rogues that could communicate and negotiate and have alternative intentions. So freebooters would either be orcs that were left over from other clans and fights, or if they had genetic mutation traits, or if they had like if they were, for example, Dok Grotsnik, who is obviously a runt herder by genetic and inheritance, and that's a general skill or role for an orc to have in a community. Every community has grots, but the way he evolved and became odd in his own way made him end up as a freebooter, because he was going above and beyond his natural role as a runt herder. Therefore, he was made into a freebooter, right? So it's not that he genetically as a runt herder is a freebooter. It's that because he evolved and became an outlier, he became a freebooter, which is sick. That's why I think freebooters is a very unique, cool clan trait in itself.
Right.
Like we said, he had a previous encounter with Ufthak where he had his the Black Tooth, the ship, right?
Yeah, space cruiser. So he has his own ship, which is very rare. Not a lot of war bosses have those.
Yeah, unless they're big war bosses, right? Big, already announced. Maybe Ufthak might have one now, but until the second book, he didn't have one, at least. But now he has his own that he constantly is known for. When they see it, just like in the Ufthak book, they were able to identify his ship just by how glamorous and big and awesome it was, right? So imagine whenever he meets another orc clan, he has plenty of teeth to trade with them and do certain things if he wants to, or if he's able to. So in that case, he has a big ship and he has other encounters with Ufthak.
Yeah, and the other cool little tidbit is his gun, the Rippa.
The Rippa
is radioactive.
Yes, which makes so much more sense for why it was hazardous when we had it, right? So Ufthak's weapon is Kaptain Badrukk's weapon is actually a radioactive gun, which means that his coat that he carries, his lead it has iron within it. So what did you say?
Iron laced?
Yeah, it's iron laced is the way I was putting it for. Sorry. So he has an iron laced trench coat to kind of mitigate and save himself from the radioactive supercharged Rippa. And then David was like, well, what about the people near him? Like, don't stand close or just move back, you're just SOL. Yeah, you're just straight out of luck, it's over. But it would also do give a little bit of explanation for why the other freebooters that are near him also tend to adopt his look. Maybe that's why they have coats also, because they're getting it from the radioactive leftovers from him, or their guns have a little bit of that power within them and radioactive within them, so then they have that as well. So I thought that that's why they also duplicate what he looks like. When you said, well, what happens to everyone near him? I think, well, maybe they started to just copy and mimic. That's what orcs typically do. They'll mimic who's bigger than them and such, and what worked. So probably just mimicked his look because it was also stopping them all from melting from his radioactive weapons.
Well, that and the other thing we were looking at with freebooters is it's not common for them to have pain boys.
Oh yeah, that was a good point.
So I guess that's the only way you're gonna have a career as a freebooter is to have a trench coat.
Yeah. So what you mean by that is because it's not a genetic trait to be a freebooter. You just kind of get what you get when it comes to big mechs, when it comes to pain boys, because they won't naturally be born into your wall like that often. You don't really have that same synergistic WAAAGH energy that will develop a bunch of these kind of native orc skills and traits. You kind of just adopt them based off when you meet them. So that's why a lot of your freebooter models, your flash kit models, have peg legs or robotic cybernetic arms or eye patches. because since they have no docs or very little docs, they tend to do just whatever is the quickest, direct way to get themselves back into the fight, which was just another funny thing to bring up. So yeah, that was Kaptain Badrukk with the winner. And I think as for what I think what's going to happen is for him, I think most likely Ufthak is going to be brought into the game as well. But the question is, would they still bring Kaptain Badrukk with a new model?
I mean, if they are going to be the main bad, you kind of need a little more flavor.
You kind of do. I mean, what's to say they wouldn't put a new character as well as just reintroduce him? They have introduced other Black Library characters, so Ufthak could be brought back up. But I'm highly encouraged, and I'm actually really happy to see that orcs still love what's old and traditional, what's been they're familiar with, and still love what orc traditionally are known for, and our aesthetics and our way to be known in 40K. Than really just necessarily jumping on and only being familiar with the most new shiny thing that was put forward by GW. So even though I like Ufthak and he's layered in a lot of fun ways, it's really, really hard to beat someone as unique and diverse as Kaptain Badrukk. And Kaptain Badrukk, just like in the first book, his uniqueness of being a rogue mercenary type orc allows him to just be way more flexible in any kind of story that he's introduced to. Even like David said, if he's introduced to as a background character, gets into a fight, leaves the area, doesn't need too much explanation. You just know him as the big piratey looking orc. Right. So Kaptain Badrukk still has a lot of inspiration for me in that way, just because he can be an ally to the Imperium, an enemy, a stealer, a third party fighter, all types of different things. And I think that's just it for orcs as a whole. So that's it for ORKtober's Who's Biggest and Best, Who Krumped the Rest. With Kaptain Badrukk coming out on top.
Yeah, no, that was fun. Yeah. Thanks for everyone for participating. We got a lot of participation in this, more than I expected.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for you guys being there, because we were just wanting to know how, talk about the orc lore stuff, because I'm actually really into just 40K orc lore and orcs themselves as a faction. Kind of keeps me motivated. And Flynn right here, yes, please, book club. Having trouble finding which books orcs have. Right. And I think that something also that people aren't familiar with is that the writing of GW has drastically changed from something like the Horus Heresy. So if you listened or read something like the Beast Arises series, which is something that's always encouraged to new orc players, I find it to be outdated in its style of writing and have a dated point of view of how orcs would operate or be introduced as characters and their motives. More bestial, more Tyranid style, a little bit in that way, which is fine because you get to see awesome, cool feats, which is what I liked about the book. The feats that are in the book, like the attack moons, are cool, and the size of the orcs and such. But I think the more that orcs have evolved to the modern days, the more appealing they've become because of their layers. They can be just as intimidating and victorious as any other faction, but they have way more depth in their personality. I mean, everybody knows being funny is best. Like, let's be honest. Everybody knows the funny guys wins, right? So yeah, I think thanks for that, because I do think I want to. There's several books that I liked that I think people will overlook, and most people don't have the time or the patience to go through an entire book, maybe reading it continuously or listening to the audio, but still want to know what's going on with orcs and where we stand. So I'm totally down for doing that, because I like to tell stories. Let's see. Is there a chance Ufthak? Yeah, we think Ufthak is going to come back in here. That's what we were thinking. And yeah, he bought Ufthak at Adepticon. Joe, you bought everybody at Adepticon. Yeah. Joe bought, Joe with us. Shout out to Joe in person. He bought Kaptain Badrukk, Mad Dok Grotsnik. I think he even got a Zagstruk. He got a Squig off. He got Ufthak. You went crazy, dude. You got everything. And we knew. I told you in person, dude. I don't know what's going to happen here. And you were like, yeah, but I like the model, so we're doing it anyways. And he did it. So shout out to you, crazy git. Which does highlight Adeptus Ridiculous does a 4-part with War of the Beast. Maybe you want to watch that then instead of listening to the 9-book series or whatever of War of the Beast. Right. You just listen to Adeptus Ridiculous, so silly it gets. So I like that. Okay. All right. So then yeah, I think that is that we want to close it up with that, and you crazy gits.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of we're trying to also touch more on the lore because we have a reputation right now of being competitive, but only.
Yeah.
But the main reason we do that is to help the community learn the tactics to stay playing orcs over the long run. Right?
Yeah, the actual real motive of the channel and goal of the channel is to retain orc players in the orc community. I know that sounds really just general and generic, but from me, I didn't meet another orc player for several years who was actually playing the game to any competitive degree. Everyone I met was like a painter or just started collecting, and then people gave me models because they just didn't want to play their orcs.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not even lying. A lot of the orcs that I got secondhand, just no one wanted to play them. And I started in 8th edition, so it's not like I even started in like the worst edition ever, where orcs didn't exist. It's just very deep faction, hard to play faction. You know, Art of War, we're doing their faction breakdowns, and you constantly hear them say orcs are just a hard, volatile faction to play, which means you need more motive than simply the rules to play all the time, right? So it's for orcs, to me, were all encompassing on why I want to play 40k, and that's why the whole motive of the channel is actually just to retain all the gits, to keep invested in these guys and keep encouraged to what they already invested their time and money and interest into. And it doesn't have to simply be only the competitive nature. If you're a part of the orc community, you just so happen to be a part of the best faction in 40k, because of the layers and versatility of them. And that was what today was trying to explore and talk about, and to show more about to someone who's new or intermediate, to say like, hey, that's true. Orcs really can have a lot of potential in the future of Amazon, and merch and GW and models. I mean, this is the perfect timing to be the big bads, right?
Yeah.
When, oops, we just happen to have an Amazon deal and we need a lot of short stories. Well, who's someone that we don't have to explain? Well, we can do a Tyranids. Yeah, but Tyranids don't talk. They have no motive.
Right.
They have no encouragement. Everyone's seen a monster before. Everyone's seen a Zerg monster before. Oh, if it's chaos, well, then I got to explain which chaos god it is and their motive. Okay, if I got to do Necrons, well, what is that? Is a Terminator? Is that a magic Terminator? What's happening? So there are things that you have to explain. They live immortal because they made a deal with the Star God. Okay, but that's not a short story, right? An orc running at you and beating up a commissar is a short story. That's perfect for an Amazon show. Everyone knows what an orc is. Just giving him a little hat, like a ball cap, and making him a Mando is just enough to make him more interesting. So I'm pumped. If you haven't noticed, I'm pumped. Shout out to all that gets the Valrek and all them other gets that are interested in the future of orcs. But I think everyone in the whole Warhammer community is sleeping on our potential going into this Amazon deal. Right. Everyone's talking about chaos. Everyone's talking about which version of Marine. Everyone's talking whatever. Dude, you're going to see orcs. Space Marine, the first game was orcs for a reason. All right. And I know it didn't kick off like Tyranids, but they didn't have the same, game engines and such. So I don't think it was necessarily Tyranids that carried it. I think it was the game engine that carried that game a lot. So that's just my point of view. So let me know. Started orcs in 10th edition. Yeah, you crazy git. You went all over the world too, just traveling all over America, fighting all the biggest gits. Started in March, orcs only, baby. Yeah. Remember when I started 40k, dude? Back in the day, and I was like, man, there's so much here. And back in the day when I started 40k, there was no orc channels necessarily, and any lore video was like secondary lore, or like someone just reading the WAAAGHpedia verbatim in a monotone voice, or they would just say very generic, stereotypical phrases and beliefs from the orcs. And I was like, is that like 15-year-old lore you just said to me? Like, what is happening? So that's why I'm like, no, dude, I'm into the orcs for way more than that, because I used to spend every day just Googling, trying to find more cool stuff that I can listen to and learn about orcs. And there was never really anything other than like Beast Arises, stuff like that. So I'm down to do anything, reviews or books or talk about lore. So let me know, leave a like, say it in the comments so anyone comes across this video knows what's going on, and doesn't think that we're just weirdos looking at a chart. So yeah, invite over to the WAAAGH. Exactly, my boy. Whoa. I'm just too cynical to think we'll be in a big show. Why not? We're literally, remember the Kill Team box when all the Mandos came through? That box way more popular than any of the Kill Team boxes you've seen it. Right. We did have Deathcore Krieg, but there's a reason why GW picked Deathcore Krieg to fight orcs. It's so iconic, just like the book 14 Hours, where it's guardsmen fighting orcs. You know, it's just the most human, relatable antagonist. You're a human, you're fighting a humanoid monster that looks like a orc from multi other fantasy universes. Very linear, and that's what you really want when you're appealing to the general public. So I don't think you need to be too cynical. I think it's very practical between previous previews, previous games, our model lines, and the fact that we're going to be the next big bads. So,
well, that, and you know, Henry Cavill is spearheading this, so he's been in the hobby for a while.
And he knows what an orc is.
Yeah, he knows.
Yeah, you know, if he don't, he gonna find out, dude. You don't get stuck in, dude. What's up, Henry Cavill? All right. So with that being said, there's only one thing to keep in mind, Henry Cavill, is don't cross our wall because we'll knock your teeth out. Whoa.